It is happening, you guys. We have a very phenomenal special guest with us, a very heavy hitter that is much needed not only within the Ummah but across the world right now. But again, before we spoil who our tasteful guest is, I think we should go ahead, Jabril, and kick this show off the road.
Yes, very excited, everybody. All right, Mo, give me the countdown.
Let's go, baby. 3, 2, 1.
What's going on, everybody? This is Jabril Salam.
And Muhammad Hassan.
And you're listening to the Young and Muslim Podcast.
Asalaamu Alakum, everybody. Oh, Jabril, that was too mellow.
No, because we're in public. I gotta keep it very, very.
Yes, the kids want that energetic mama. That's what gets them out of bed in the morning. But yes, so without further ado, our guest here today, mashallah, is going to cover a very much needed topic for us, especially those in the West and within the United States. We are going to talk about Afghanistan. We have our sister with us today, Ilaha Omar. Asalaamu Alakum, sister.
Wa alaikum assalam, brothers. So happy to be here with you today.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. And look, I know there is so much ground to cover, and we probably need 3 to 4 different episodes. Well, unless we do 2 4-hour ones, then I think we can.
we'll be here for a while.
We'll be here for a little bit. But no, there's so much ground to cover. But I think the biggest thing that we want to do right now is to start off with who you are, a little bit about your background, and then we can kind of map out in regards to how we got into this predicament with Afghanistan in regards to the U.S. and Afghanistan conflict and how it started off with the Soviets. So we want to learn more about the history, learn more about you, and then I guess we'll just start from there.
Sure, absolutely. First of all, I'm not an Afghanistan history expert, but I would like to align my own personal story and my own personal journey with what's unfolded through the last 42 years in Afghanistan. And that starts with the Soviet invasion. But a little about me, first of all. My name is, again, Ilaha, and I was born in Kabul, Afghanistan. And I was born the night that the president was assassinated. And it was the brink of the USSR and Afghan war. I left at 40 days old, and we came to Germany, my family and I, very, very similar to what's happening right now in Afghanistan with the refugees fleeing the country. It's kind of history repeating itself. And we got to Hamburg, well, actually Frankfurt, Germany first. Many Afghans were just staying in hotels. My father used to go daily and pick up the new incoming refugees and assist them. We stayed there for about 10 months and head over to the States. We came to New York. We got to New York, JFK. I took my first steps at the airport. And then we came to California. So I've been living in California ever since.
Wow. So beautiful. So you came to California with your whole family, correct, at the time?
Sure. My immediate family, but my grandfather and uncles were already here. They kind of escaped a little bit earlier, but my mom was pregnant and my dad was like, let's just wait till Ilaha is born in Afghanistan. And there was probably something deeper there for him too. Mm-hmm. And then so we were literally at the last to leave out of the family.
Got you. So what is it that you do? Because we know, but the audience don't know.
Well, so my background is actually tech, and I used to run a technical staffing firm, and I was naturally inclined to humanitarian work. My parents kind of raised in that environment. So it was more of like a natural place for me to go to, especially when my business was doing okay. And I was able to do that. And I started my humanitarian work about a little over 20 years ago. And it wasn't just limited to Afghanistan. I've been to Haiti 5 times. I've been to Kenya. So, but Afghanistan, obviously it's my country. And it's been suffering, and it's a natural place to want to support and help. So by profession, I have a technology background, but by passion, I'm involved with humanitarian work, and it's very much grassroots-driven humanitarian work. And I've worked with many grassroots organizations through the years, some of which empower women, some of which support children who've been victims of war, who've lost limbs. That's an organization called Children of War Foundation. I've brought actually 2 Afghan amputees, little kids, to the States a few times to get prosthetic treatment at Shriners Hospital through this organization. I support another organization called Enable Children Initiative, and we support people with disabilities, specifically children who've been abandoned or orphaned and live with a disability. And so since 2003, I've been traveling back home, and I've been involved in these various projects. It started with passing out school supplies and winter clothes. And then it progressively got a little bit more like bigger. I call it, I started hand out, and then I became hand up because
yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit more about your upbringing, right? You mentioned when you came to the U.S., you took your first steps at the JFK airport. How did that passion get instilled in you in regards to tech and humanitarian work? Is that something that, you know, your family gave to you, or was it more of just the environment that you were in and you saw the life that, you know, you could have potentially lived if you were to stay back home? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
That's a good question, because that there's something called like a, what is it, savior complex or savior guilt. No, I'm sorry.
Survivor's guilt.
Survivor's guilt.
There's survivor's guilt, and then savior complex. Yeah, both of them.
So I do feel like I have that, and I feel that I'm privileged. I was able to flee the country. We came here as refugees. We started from nothing. It's the American dream. We built it. We created a life, and I felt that it's my responsibility to help those who didn't make it out, those who are still suffering through the decades and decades and decades of war. So it was both something that I felt like was the right thing to do. I was in a position that I was able to do it, and going back home, and when you see it and you experience it and when you connect with the people, that's a whole other dimension. It's like it became an addiction for me, to be honest, because you just feel so empowered to be able to go and make an impact and see what it does for the people and how appreciative they are.
Wow. And so you said something that many might not have caught, but I definitely caught it. You said decades and decades and decades. You said it 3 times, right? And I think here in America, whenever the topic of Afghanistan in the U.S. comes up, we think of the 20-year war. Well, you said decade 3 times, meaning that there was something going on in Afghanistan before the U.S. even stepped foot in there. And you also alluded to the fact that when you were born, that was the assassination of the Afghan president. So what was going on before the United States ever got involved and stepped foot into Afghanistan that I guess kind of was the first domino to this long domino effect?
Sure. That's a good question. So when I was born, I told you guys it was kind of like the coup d'etat, the onset of war, and what that war was between the USSR and Afghanistan. And the USSR was, expanding their footprint, let's just say, and into South Asia, and it started with Afghanistan. This happened 79 to 89, 10 years of war. What was interesting is that US, in fear of the Soviet Union's dominance, stepped up to help the Afghanistan fight. And they basically supported the Mujahideen, the freedom fighters.
Gotcha.
And so that's actually the first part of US interference.
Okay.
Now the Mujahideen started fighting USSR, the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, and they were armed and trained by Pakistan, by US, and Saudi Arabia. So this is the byproduct of this was the Taliban.
Really?
And that's how the Taliban started forming. And actually, Osama bin Laden was helping the US in Afghanistan fight this war as well.
Wow.
It was a plot twist, you know, who don't know.
Could you really quick, because I know, I mean, a lot of our listeners are Muslims and they've heard the Mujahideen name, and I'm sure they themselves have done some research, but if you can give us a quick, excerpt of who they are, and I think that would be really beneficial.
Yeah, so they were basically the people in Afghanistan that were fighting for Afghanistan's freedom. And well, Afghanistan's always been a complicated situation just because we have so many, we're very ethnically rich, we're very tribal. But in summary, this group was fighting the freedom fighters for Afghanistan. And this soon came to be, after this the Soviet Union war, it kind of spread out to other countries and saying, the Mujahideen, which eventually became the Taliban, and Al-Qaeda fighting for, they were pissed at the world, and the US became the next target, hence September 11.
Got it.
So at this time when the Mujahideen stepped in and everybody's funding them, where is the Afghanistan government? Where are the troops? Where are those individuals that you may think would come up when things like this actually go down?
Well, there was a president, and there was always this turmoil where one president would get assassinated by the next. So it was just very unstable government for many years after we had a monarchy. And then it just kind of, there was a monarchy for 40 years. And then after that, it just kind of went to different powers. And then communism came into the country. And there was actually Afghanistan at some point, they were allies with USSR. And then things shifted. The US didn't like the spread of communism, and they kind of stepped in, basically. To just make it very simple, a complex situation. So September 11 happens, right? And that's shocking and it's horrific, especially for the Muslim communities in America.
Yeah.
We all remember that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And what happens is the US starts bombing Afghanistan. And I want to make it clear that none of the hijackers were Afghan. They were mostly from Saudi Arabia. But why Afghanistan was because Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda had received safe haven in Afghanistan from the Taliban. So the one person who once helped America fight the Soviet Union is now the enemy.
Got it.
And this was the next 20 years fighting Taliban insurgency and fighting terrorism. And 20 years later, which just marked, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
This happened. So I think what it was that people were tired of Afghanistan. I think that the US is the longest war in history. You've heard that soundbite a lot.
Yeah.
Trump's re-election campaign was all about ending the longest war in history. He initiated a peace deal, peace talks at that point in 2018 with the Taliban. And that was really bad. Because the US just legitimized the Taliban. And because they bypassed the Afghan government, they automatically delegitimized the Afghan government. So now Taliban got the leverage.
It's what they wanted.
They wanted that. It was perfect. They won.
Mm-hmm.
They won. That's it. Halas, they won.
Yeah.
And then Biden steps in. And I don't think he was ever a fan of the Afghan war, ever. Mm-hmm. And he basically handed us on a silver platter. Mm-hmm. And well, if you guys remember, Bagram fell. They actually deserted Bagram on about July 5th, July 6th. And then all of a sudden, all these provinces and municipalities started falling. I'm sure you heard like breaking news. This place fell, this place fell in. And then it got to Kabul. The Taliban got to Kabul, and Kabul, they very easily take it over. Meanwhile, I know that the government and the Taliban in the US were just really trying to come up with some negotiations to make it an all-inclusive government. But I don't know what, I still am shocked. Everybody's shocked. How did that happen so fast? How did it unfold so fast? How did they so easily take over? And there's an explanation for everything. And again, I'm not an expert in this, but here we are today dealing with almost the same mess that happened 20 years ago.
I kind of want to go back to September 11th and kind of bring it back to today. When that happened, I was, I believe, in elementary school, and all we knew was that, hey, the airplanes were hijacked by terrorists, which they said were Muslim. And that's when we had the whole stigma of Muslims being terrorists. But there wasn't much information, at least because I was a young kid, that started to come out in regards to them being from Saudi, right? And in regards to Osama bin Laden being in Saudi and having a lot of businesses. When I went to Umrah in Saudi Arabia, I saw his name everywhere, his family's name, and I just thought it was a coincidence. I was like, no, that's not, it can't be the same bin Laden. And I was like, no, it definitely is. So I guess the question that comes to mind is that why didn't people start asking questions and getting clues when people were pointing at Afghanistan, but clearly these people were from a whole different country?
Mm-hmm. That's it. That's the question. Exactly. So how come that never, was very clear to people? How come I'm still trying to make, hey, side note, by the way, none of the hijackers were Afghan. None of the terrorists were Afghan.
Yeah.
And they were Saudi, and Saudi has a great relationship with the US. So I'm going to let the listeners put that together,
Yeah.
I try to stay away from the controversial topics, and I try to just be talk about what's, the Afghans felt like, whoa, this is, we're getting hit for this. And yes, they did receive safe haven in Afghanistan, but I'll tell you, Osama bin Laden didn't get killed in Afghanistan. He got killed in Pakistan. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He received safe haven there. So it's very controversial, Pakistan's involvement, Saudi Arabia's involvement with the Taliban, and Pakistan's continued support of the Taliban. I mean, they all come from Pakistan. Wow. They're all trained. They receive medical aid, everything from Pakistan. So,
wow. Well, to stay on Afghanistan, because right now we're seeing possibly the start of what can be one of the worst humanitarian crises going on right now. What is the current situation for the Afghanistan people? Because all we see on the news is these people are evacuating. They're evacuating this amount of people, and they're showing just the dire necessity for people to get out. What does it look like on the ground, and what does it look like in the near future for the Afghan people?
Bad. So you guys saw on the news what was going on the airport, right? Those loud crowds, and it was a horrific scene. I was involved with evacuating people. I still am. people who feel threatened by the Taliban, high women, human rights activists, journalists who feel that they may be victims of reprisal killings and revenge killings. Because again, it's unclear where the Taliban stand. You know, they claim they're 2.0, they claim they're going to build an inclusive government, they claim women are going to have the right, have basic rights, but that's not really happening.
Yeah.
And, you know, already people have a history with them. So the evacuations is one part. So there's like numerous crises unfolding in Afghanistan right now. We have evacuations. We have in-country. If we don't do something very quickly about the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, 97% of the country will fall in universal poverty.
Oh.
And we are heading towards mass famine. So when people were leaving, they also, the banks, they had a run on the banks. So there's a cash crisis. And people, they haven't been paid. No government workers been paid. There's no wages. There's COVID. There's drought, there's internally displaced, there's an unstable, unclear government of what they're going to kill people, are they going to let people live, are they going to let girls go to school, are they going to make women stay home? And you know what, it's very unclear. Their acts currently are not proving to be very positive. And so my ask has always been, let's hold them accountable. Let's keep human rights at the forefront and stay vigilant about human rights in Afghanistan, especially for women.
So from the Afghanistani people side, the perception, who can they trust? Right? They're evacuating, they're going out to the US, but they're like, you guys are putting us in the hands of the same people that tortures us for about 20 years, if that's the case, because we hear on this side, because, you know, here in Northern Virginia and DC, a lot of people do work for the government. We have the Coast Guard, the Marine Corps, different military individuals that are friends, right, and family. So when they go over there, they tell us like, yeah, we went over there to help the people, right, to help stabilize their government. And then, but you don't hear much from the other side, what the Afghanistani people are saying about the U.S., the troops, and what we actually did. Don't know if you have that type of information or that type of perspective to share with everybody.
Yeah, I do, because I help run a team that's working on the ground, a team that stayed back, because this is the group Enable Children Initiative that basically supports people with disabilities. About 95% of our team stayed back. And so I have my finger on the pulse of like what people are feeling on the ground, and they feel abandoned. They're pissed off. US came to Afghanistan to bring democracy, to bring empowerment of women, to bring jobs, the gazillion dollars of aid pumped into the country. And then all of a sudden, they literally pack up, like the way Bagram was deserted, the way that you saw how they left the airport. Yeah. I mean, how should they feel? I mean, obviously they're pissed off. And the ones who are afraid, obviously, most of the country probably want to leave the country. I mean, there probably are Taliban sympathizers for sure, but they're afraid of what's going to happen. And when they see all these people leaving, you know, it brings more fear and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So
another question.
Yeah.
Another question to tail off that question is that because you forget about the individuals that actually used to work with the people in the United States, such as reporters, people in media. So like whether it's the Taliban and people know like, hey, he used to be really close with the Americans. The Americans aren't here anymore. We might have to go over there and kind of rough him up a little bit and see what he knows. Like, is there a lot of that still going on? And what are those people like? What are they starting to do?
Yes, so there are people who the Taliban feel that, you know, they need to take revenge from. Let me make something clear. The Taliban, from my personal experience, again, I'm not an expert. I'm just telling you my story, my version of the story. There's a tremendous amount of infighting happening within the Taliban. You know, you have the Haqqani and you have the different Taliban. You have people who, Mullah Biadar, who was trying to create an all-inclusive government. You have people that say, nope, that's not happening. So within the governing of the country is looking really bad. So somebody can tell you, a Talib can say, don't worry, you're good, but the next one come and shoot you in the head.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So that sense of instability is extremely difficult to live in.
So in the beginning, when we started talking about the humanitarian crisis that's going on for the Afghan people, you mentioned a bunch of things: the banks, famine. Obviously, right now, COVID is hitting everywhere in the world. For the hunger shortage and the money shortage, how does that happen? I know, a lot of leaders left Afghanistan taking money and trying to get out with everything they could, but how is it that a whole country, you said 97%, are going to be affected by famine just like overnight? How does that happen?
Because 80 to 90% of the economy, the budget, depended on foreign aid, and that foreign aid is now frozen.
And so for it to be unfrozen, what has to happen?
Well, the Taliban is a sanctioned entity, so the country is now sanctioned. So to pump money into the government, this is a very controversial topic, because on one hand, if you keep the money frozen, well, that's leading to direct suffering of the Afghan people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you unfreeze the money, you're basically funding a fundamental regime that you're not sure that will abide by basic human rights.
If that's the case, then why did the U.S. leave all the weapons and the what was it, the weapons and what else? The tanks,
all the
they left
machinery.
like all the artillery there too. So if they're worried about the cash doing that, then what about the actual the machinery?
These are questions that we should continue to keep asking.
Mm-hmm.
These are really good questions that we should know. Well, this just doesn't make sense. Is it because, Biden set this date and they just had to get out?
Mm-hmm.
His whole thing was on the 20th anniversary, we're out.
A little bit. That's American style. It's a lot of symbolism, but in many ways. We won't go into that, but
that's another podcast.
Yeah, that's another episode.
That's in person too.
So now you have hundreds of thousands of people evacuating. Majority are coming here to America. Are there other areas of the world where there's a large pocket of Afghan people?
Sure, they're going literally all over the world. I've personally worked with people going to Italy, France, Germany, Macedonia, Albania, Spain. Yeah, they're going all over. I mean, obviously Pakistan, Uzbekistan, the bordering countries, they're literally all over the world. Uganda.
Wow.
Rwanda.
I do want to talk a little bit more about that disbursement, because I think this is where you really fit in, because this is like your whole life story. Like, you went to a different country and settled for yourself. So I want to talk about the individuals and how they're being received in the countries that they go to. I know right now in the United States, here in Virginia, we're taking a lot of Afghan refugees, which is awesome because it's very diverse in this area. And I also go online and see stuff on Twitter. I believe there was an Afghanistani brother who was not complaining, who mentioned something about the food that he was given that was literally horrible. Like, you wouldn't even give this to anybody that was like a homeless individual, And then different correspondents and representatives of the government is like, well, if you're complaining, why don't you go back to your country? We have vets that don't even have food. We have homeless people, and you came over here, as an asylum or as a refugee, and you're complaining. You know what I mean? So it's like, we do this to the people, and then we provide them with a safe haven, but it's not really as safe as you think, because there's so much whether it's miseducation or just, animosity towards a certain group of people that were just put in that position?
Good question. So the U.S. situation, I'll break it down because I'm heavily involved in this. The U.S., I'm not so involved. I'm more the global resettlement, but U.S., the conditions in some of these camps are not good. And there've been a tremendous amount of complaints. And when I've looked into it, I've just been told that they were not expecting this. They're not ready for this. They didn't have, the capacity and the infrastructure to deal with this many people.
That makes sense.
Globally, there are some countries that are wealthier and that are basically handing, they're again able to secure fiscal responsibility, social services to the refugees. And there are some countries like maybe Albania and Macedonia that probably don't have that capacity. And they need a fiscal sponsorship for refugees. They're willing to accept them, but they need fiscal sponsorship. So that's something I'm doing, is raising money for our refugees in these countries that need basic shelter, medical care, clothing, food, translation services, legal support.
Got you. And so that's a great segue into where I was wanting to get information is when we donate, because we see the links, we see the the Instagram feed, Facebook. When we see those links and we donate our $20, $50, $100, where does that money usually go? Say if we donate towards a foundation that you're a part of, how does that money get allocated to the people that actually need it in these camps?
So there are, like I said, various different crises that are unfolding at the same time. You have in-country, you have resettlement all over the world, US and all over the world, right? And then you have brain drain of the talent coming out of the country and preserving that. This is kind of, maybe I can introduce Uplift Fund, the one that I've just initiated, because it directly relates to your question, because people see a magnitude of fundraisers happening because there's a need.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like I said, it's not just like an earthquake in Haiti we're responding to like 20 earthquakes at the same time. So there is a tremendous amount of effort into raising money in resettlement. And you'll see that here, Uber, Airbnb, a lot of these companies have stepped up. A lot of NGOs have been formed overnight to support the incoming refugees. And then you have people all over the world doing this. So to answer your question, it depends on what you're donating to. If you're donating to resettlement, it should go into these types of things. If you're donating to in-country support, it should probably be going to food or medical care or these like urgent needs that need to be addressed. For example, they just closed 6 of the 20-something or 30-something, I think it was like 37 COVID clinics in our hospitals in Afghanistan. They literally, in the height of COVID, had to shut 7 down because they just didn't have the supplies and the capacity to keep it open.
Wow. And that's in country.
That's in country.
That's not even counting the because I would imagine when you have that many people who are all immigrating and they end up in a camp that has very little infrastructure, COVID procedure is not really the top of mind and on top of the list. So a lot of that stuff, even though you just said it's in country, a lot of it's probably happening in camp as well. Like people are getting sick and they don't have the resources to help them.
Sure. The camps are trying, they're inundated. Yes, there's COVID, there's isolation. That's why people are staying in camps for a longer period of time to get through these like quarantining phases longer and they're getting other vaccines. So when an Afghan is lucky enough to flee, it's not like things get better anytime quickly. Yes, they've left maybe persecution if they were targeted for some reason. But what they're entering immediately is not a fun place. It's a very difficult, very complex, very scary environment for them.
I know you had brought up Uplift Afghanistan, so we'll make sure that everybody has a chance to click on that, but we'll talk more about that towards the end while we're wrapping up. What I wanted to ask, because our viewers and our listeners, they're always trying to figure out ways to help these type of initiatives, right? What do you think is the most effective way for individuals in America that may have the financial means or the social means, to help? Like, would it be for in-house? Would it be for the resettlements? Like, what can we do now that we can see an immediate type of change and make a difference?
That's a good question. Well, it depends on, donors are usually inclined to donating to some kind of cause. A lot of donors are particularly concerned about women and girls. So, and that, in country or out of country. So there are a few incredible grassroots organizations working to support women and girls and protect women and girls. There are some great organizations all over the US helping with resettlement. That's super direct impact, helps people get apartments, put them through some kind of English school program, help them start to resettle. And in country, there are big institutions, and the UN General Assembly at this recent one last week, they basically there's $1 million pledge to help Afghanistan through UN and through their partners. But I'm still a big advocate of grassroots organizations doing the work. And they do the work because I know on the ground who's doing the work. And there's a lot of them. They're not necessarily an organization. They could be a community effort, but they're responding to the immediate crises in their communities.
Yeah, I think for majority of us, I know at least for myself, I prefer donate to grassroots efforts because, like you said, that those 7 people, those 15 people are dedicated, and that's what they're putting all the effort into. So I know that gives me a little bit more peace of mind that it feels more connected to not the money, but to my heart wanting to help whoever it is that we're donating towards. So for anyone that's listening, make sure you guys go and help out as you can. We'll definitely leave whatever links we can on our bio so that the audience can click in, anyone listening can click in. But as Muhammad said, can you tell us a little bit more about Uplift and how we, as a young and Muslim collective, can get involved?
Sure. So Uplift Afghanistan Fund was created in response to the multiple crises unfolding at the same time. So because I've been involved with humanitarian work all my life, well, most of half of my life, I've always been asked, like, okay, so you travel back home, where do you trust, where can we donate? And I got obviously now many of my friends and people in my network were contacting me with the same questions. And so I decided to create this fund with a few other Afghan sisters of mine to be able to connect like impact-given donors with grassroots organizations that they can trust. So this is a fund that people donate to, and we as a team of experts with eyes and ears on the ground and all over the world decide, okay, this fund, we need to direct to this cause right now. Like, for example, resettlement is a big, and there's a big need to fill that right now. And in country. So we're deciding based on our network and our people on the ground where to donate the funds to. So that's it's a vehicle for people to use to be able to trust where their money is going, that there's accountability, there's transparency, and it's grassroots driven.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you to you and your team for that work, because that is 100% necessary.
Exactly. I was just going to ask what's up next for Ilaha, but definitely this initiative and what you have going on is definitely a handful. So no, we appreciate your work.
Yeah, I mean, I need to get out of this 18 hours a day and get into a normal working schedule, but it's so much to respond to, and I'm so connected to people. It's so hard, but eventually I'd love to put my heart and soul into Uplift full time and really make a huge impact and enable philanthropists and donors to make an impact. So let's just hope and pray, inshallah, that there's some kind of peace and stability for Afghanistan, number one. You know, and I'm asking the Muslim community to really hold Afghanistan in your heart. And when you pray and you do your namaz, just please keep us there, keep the Afghan people there in that prayer.
Absolutely. I mean, hopefully we're going to have a lot of young Afghanis listening to this, whether it's today or 20 years from now, you know, and they look back and like, wow, look at the difference that, you know, Allah had made. So if you had some parting words or a few pieces of advice for any refugees or young Afghani listen to this and, you know, praying for hope, what would it be?
Well, refugee or any listener?
I would say more of the refugee. Any listeners, they get advice from all of our other episodes, specifically for the refugees.
Especially the refugees that you know, coming here and starting from scratch is very scary. So actually one of Uplift's funds is called the Preservation of Knowledge, Culture, and Art Fund, where we hope that all the talent that's coming out of the country, that we could place them with fellowships and get them scholarships for school and match them up to academia so that they can maintain our culture and keep our culture alive, because we don't want our culture to die. So that, you know, we have a very strong diaspora that's stepping up. We have friends of Afghanistan that are stepping up, people like you that are sharing your platform. You know, you never know what comes out of this. So I'm thankful that, and I'm hopeful that the refugees are going to be taken care of, inshallah. Now we just got to also focus on those left behind.
Absolutely. So you guys heard it best from Ilaha. If you guys want to keep up with Ilaha, how can our listeners and viewers find more about you and the work that you're doing?
Good question. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram, and we have our website, which is www.upliftafghanistan.org. And I can give my handle to you guys. It's miss.ellie, which is ELI_4 underscores. And you can follow me. And I'm going to start to post more. I'm more of like the behind the scenes girl and social media. But it's an important way to, you know, communicate with the world today. So I have to communicate.
Absolutely. Look, we struggle with it too. So we completely understand. But you guys heard it best. Make sure you guys go check out Uplift Afghanistan. Ilaha and her team are doing amazing things, as you guys know already. So check that out. And we are just so happy to have you, and thank you for all the work that you're doing.
That's for sure. Blessings.
Real Muhammad, thank you so much for your time today. I really, lots of gratitude for you guys.
So I think it's time to wrap up this show, Young and Muslim style.
All right, cool. Muhammad, how long have we been on, my friend?
Yes, we've been on for about 45.
But before we get to that, Muhammad, if the listeners want to find us and they want to hear more of these episodes, how can they find us, my friend?
Yes, I thought you would never ask. If you want to... Listen.
Yes.
If you want to listen to our episodes, our previous episodes, it's on all major platforms that you listen to, whether it's your music or podcasts. It's SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Pandora, iHeartRadio. I mean, the list goes on. And you can watch us on YouTube. Look at these beautiful faces. And Jabril, if they want to shoot us a direct message and get in touch with us, how can they do that?
Yeah, if you guys want to talk to us and you want to see more of us behind the scenes, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Young and Muslim. That's YOUNG, the letter N, Muslim, young and Muslim. Make sure you guys go on, follow, like, subscribe, comment, and of course, go and see all that we have to offer from our lovely guests, Ilaha here included. So, for the last 46 minutes now, you have been listening to the Young and Muslim podcast. I'm Jabil Salam.
And Muhammad Hassan.
And this is
Ilaha Omar.
Hey. And we leave with degrees of peace.
Asalaamu
Alaikum.
Salam. Peace out.
Peace.